Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
On this week's program, Republican and DFL party leaders weigh in on the upcoming midterm election. Plus, an old memorial on the Capitol grounds begins anew as a tribute to Minnesota's Medal of Honor recipients. Stay tuned for this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Lurkey. Between now and November 8th, Minnesotans will be casting their votes for governor and other constitutional offices, for the state legislature, and for members of Congress. Joining me to provide his perspective on the midterm election is the chair of the Minnesota Republican Party, David Hann. Thank you for being here.
Good to be with you.
You have been the chair of the Republican Party for nearly a year now, and the last time we spoke, you had just led the effort that allowed the Republicans to retake the majority here in the Minnesota Senate in 2017. How has your wealth of campaign and leadership experience helped you in your new role as party chair?
Well, I'm sure you know, and I'm sure most people know, that this kind of work, political work, is the result of many, many people doing lots and lots of things. So leading a caucus or leading a party is a little bit like being a coach of a team where you've got lots and lots of players, and most of the hard work is done by the players on the field. So I think in my case, having had some experience raising money and talking to donors has been helpful. And also I think my experience in the legislature has helped. I have lots of friends, lots of relationships with people who serve in the State House and the State Senate, which has been helpful, and just having that background of experience with people in the political world, in the Republican political world, I think that's been helpful, and my goal has been to try to build an organization that has the capacity to be effective over time, and that's just kind of the nuts and bolts. It's not necessarily very I guess fancy or
glamorous.
Right, glamorous. It's kind of behind the scenes, but it's important work, and I think we've made good progress.
All 201 state legislative seats and 8 congressional seats will be on the November ballot in newly drawn districts. Is it harder to manage campaigns in new districts?
It can be. There's always, every 10 years when you do this, there's always some turnover, and there's always things that happen that are a little bit difficult to sort through. Sometimes legislators have to decide whether they're going to move somewhere or retire, and these things are always hard to predict before the maps are drawn. So those kinds of things tend to make the campaign prospects a little more challenging. But I think in this case this year, the districts that were drawn, we believe, have not been detrimental to Republicans in our efforts to retain the majority in the state Senate and capture the majority in the House. So even though there's always a change, and you know, people sometimes complain about how legislators never retire, but in state legislators, certainly in Minnesota, we see a fair amount of turnover, which is not a bad thing. But as far as electorally, I don't think it's been an impediment. It's just means that we have had in many cases a lot of new candidates.
While high-profile statewide races like that for the governor's office or the attorney general are getting the bulk of political coverage, voters will find other party-endorsed candidates on their ballot. What are some of the common goals that a voter can expect by choosing or from choosing Republican-endorsed candidates?
I think one of the things that we've seen, and certainly through polling and focus groups and other activities that we've done, that the public has a fair amount of frustration with Democrat leadership, not only in Minnesota but across the country. The president is at a maybe historic low in terms of popularity, certainly in Minnesota, not well liked other than by stalwarts of the Democratic Party. And I think the governor and the legislative leaders, Democrat legislative leaders, have the same kinds of burdens. We've seen lots of things happen in the last 4 years that people have been unhappy with, notably the increase in crime and the apparent inability on the part of the governor and the legislative leaders, Democrat leaders, to try to adopt policies that would prevent it and restore confidence that people have. And I think the economy, that those two things are the big issues. And I think legislative candidates, as well as our statewide candidates, are trying to bring out to people that the conditions that we have today are the result of policies chosen by Democrats. And so if you're unhappy with crime, if you're unhappy with the faltering economy, maybe it's time to give Republicans an opportunity to lead in a different direction.
So you've previewed my next question, because generally speaking, the party not holding the White House, so generally benefits in midterm elections. And that would be good for Republicans, as you're saying, because it would be a kind of referendum against the current state of affairs. You mentioned the economy and crime. There's also the overturning of Roe v. Wade by the Supreme Court. Are those the main issues that you think voters are concerned about right now?
Well, everything that we've seen would suggest that crime and the economy, those two are by far the most pressing issues for most voters. The inflation has just been devastating to people on fixed incomes and lower income, and I think the crime affects everybody, and great concern over that. But there are other issues too. Education is a big issue. We've heard a lot about that. People frustrated with the response to the pandemic that the governor took in shutting down schools for almost 2 years. It caused a lot of upheaval. We've seen a deterioration of performance by students. So that is certainly a big issue. The overturning of Roe v. Wade, I think Democrats have, unfortunately, by misleading the public, tried to make it into an issue. I think they know as well as anybody that the Supreme Court has interpreted our Constitution to say that abortion is a protected right, and no governor, no individual can overturn that, and yet the Democrats are trying to, and spending a lot of money, trying to persuade people that somehow our governor candidate can do that magically. I don't know how. So I find that a little disappointing that Democrats are willing to mislead the public in that way. But everything that we've seen says that the issues of the economy and crime are the top issues. Education is certainly in the mix, but there are other issues as well, healthcare among them.
In past years, it was common to pose a question in this kind of forum about the rural-urban divide. In this election year, there are a number of greater Minnesota legislative seats that lack a DFL candidate. There are a number of urban seats that lack a Republican candidate. Has a voter's regional residence become a stronger predictor of how they will vote?
Well, I'm not sure if I'd say it quite that way. I think that there are certainly characteristics in greater Minnesota that are different than the metro area. For one thing, if you live outside of the metro area, if you want to do anything, go to the store, go to church, go to school, you have to drive, sometimes a significant distance. So when you talk about the rise in fuel prices, for example, really has a significant impact on people outside of the metro area. If you live in the metro area, you might be able to walk or ride a bus or something, but outside of the metro area, you don't have those kinds of options. So there are issues that are maybe more resonant with some voters rather than others. Certainly lots of agricultural issues that are very important to rural Minnesotans that most in the metro area are unfamiliar with. So there are issues, I think, that distinguish those two groups, and what we've seen in the past number of election cycles is that in greater Minnesota, Republicans have been able to speak to those issues more effectively than Democrats. You might say kind of the converse is true with respect to urban and metropolitan area voters, but we have this year been spending a fair amount of time trying to talk with and understand the issues for suburban, ex-urban, metro area voters, and we think that they share a lot of the concerns that the rest of the state shares. So we're trying to see if we can bridge that divide a little bit this time.
How has the preponderance of social media changed campaigning and fundraising? I'm seeing ads pop up in some of the apps that I use, but I'm also getting traditional pieces of mail in my mail. Is it different, the same? What's your take?
It's different, no question about it. Even in the time that I've been involved in politics, we've seen a whole lot of change with the advent of social media and the kinds of analytical tools that exist today that didn't even exist a few years ago when I was running for office in the state Senate. So I think there's a level of sophistication and the ability to understand what individual voters' interests are and to target messaging to them. It really is almost astounding the level of knowledge that some of the companies that do this have the ability to do. So that has certainly changed. In some respects, it's made reaching voters a little easier. but it's also a little more challenging. We used to do lots of phone calling. That's become a little more of a challenge. People don't typically answer their phone unless they know who it is. So I think there's been a change in how we do voter contact and how we do get out the vote and how we do how we message to potential voters. So I'm not sure if it's harder or easier, but it is very different. And I think it does require some different tools, and both political parties, I think, have become more used to working in this new world.
Republican Party Chair David Hann, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
It's good to be with you.
The Promise of Youth, a statue on the State Capitol Mall dedicated years ago as a war memorial, has been incorporated into a tribute honoring Minnesota's Medal of Honor recipients. Many gathered recently for a ceremony filled with music, cannons, a flyover of vintage aircraft, and speeches to celebrate the new monument.
The spirit of the Medal of Honor recipients reverberates across this country every day. And to the families of the Minnesotans, I've had the privilege to visit many of the final resting places of your loved ones across this country and across the world, from Arlington to Punch Bowl in the Pacific. Young Minnesotans who were sent to lands far away to fight for causes that maybe they weren't aware and didn't know who it was for, but it gave us the privilege of living in the freest, most opportune country in the world.
But I'm here to tell you today that you don't have to be a soldier, you don't have to be a first responder in order to be a hero. You can stand up and be heard when you see some classmate, something wrong going on, whether it's a classmate being bullied or telling your pals that drug use is harmful, or taking an unpopular stance when everybody else is silent.
This memorial will be here for a very long time. It will stand as a symbol here on the Capitol grounds as a display of courage, commitment, sacrifice, patriotism, integrity, and citizenship. And it will be here for society to view and for those in this building to peer out on a daily basis as a reminder of what it takes for such a great state and a great nation to thrive. Education, honorable and brave military members, and a supportive, generous citizenry. As a matter of fact, President Abraham Lincoln once said, "Honor to the soldier and sailor everywhere who bravely bears his country's cause. Honor also the citizen who cares for his brother in the field and serves, as best he can, the same cause."
As a mother on this stage, looking out into the crowd, I'm speaking directly to the youth and the generations to come as you embrace the 6 words etched into these granite walls. May they provide you with the guidance and a place for reflection that you can feel your sense of duty to others and to continue to build character, love, and peace.
Just shortly before Cass Gilbert's passing, he drew his final hand sketch of the Capitol grounds with one memorial, a veterans memorial, where we now are. And so is it. And so here we are at the most prominent of sites on the Capitol grounds, in full and unobstructed view of the Capitol, with the entire Capitol complex laid before us. Also, being at the front entrance to the Capitol, this memorial stands in symbolic defense of not only the Capitol, but our state and nation.
Early Early voting has begun, and in the coming weeks, citizens will cast their ballots for all of Minnesota's constitutional officers, all 201 state legislative seats, and their congressional representative. Joining me to talk about the coming midterm election is the chair of the Minnesota DFL Party, Ken Martin. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm so grateful to be back with you. I think the last time we met was a couple years ago, so I'm always glad to be here.
Yes, every 2 years. So this year, this is my first up-close political experience following a redistricting. I've been struck by the massive changes that redistricting has prompted, especially, I think, this year, the huge number of lawmakers who are retiring. On top of that, redistricting, all the districts have changed. Is your job significantly harder?
Well, it makes everyone's job more difficult, not just mine, but also my counterpart on the Republican side. All of the incumbents and, of course, all the candidates who have a lot new ground to cover, new voters to introduce themselves to, and certainly new lines to run under. So this once every 10-year process is certainly confusing and frustrating for people who work in the business of trying to get people elected. But it's important. It's an important part of our democracy, and we're really excited about all the opportunities that have been created, and there's also been challenges created as well that both parties have to work through in this new redistricting map.
So one of the challenges in a redistricting is sometimes finding new candidates to run, and I noticed that in some districts, some greater Minnesota districts, there is not a DFL candidate, whereas in some urban districts, there's not a Republican candidate on the ballot. Has a voter's regional residence become a stronger predictor of how they will vote?
No, not at all. In fact, if you look at the number of vacancies that we have, the DFL, in House races or Senate races, it's far fewer than the Republicans have. We believe, our party believes, that we need to compete in every zip code throughout the state, meaning we work really hard to find candidates that will run under our party banner. It's important not just for the people who live in that district to have someone there competing for their vote. It's also important for our top of the ticket races. We know that when we contest every race in every zip code throughout the state, that we create a lift. We actually give people a reason to vote. We help galvanize local organizers and volunteers, and so it's important that we have candidates running everywhere. Look, you know, our party believes very passionately that if you're going to be a statewide party, you actually have to campaign that way, and you have to govern that way. That's what the party has done. We still win a number of seats in greater Minnesota, and sure, that's been diminishing over the years, but there's no doubt that for us, we believe that we have to compete in greater Minnesota. It's part of our strategy to win both statewide and, of course, to win the legislative majorities back.
You mentioned a statewide banner. So the governor's race is the race that will garner the most attention this fall. And when voters view their ballot, they will see party-endorsed candidates for a number of offices. So in general, what do you want Minnesota voters to know about DFL candidates who are endorsed by the party? What are the common threads?
Well, I think you have, all of our constitutional officers that are running are DFLers. The DFL party has not lost a statewide election as long as I've been chair, and we're not going to start now, knock on wood, but we've got great candidates running under a really positive message about what we've done these last 4 years to help improve people's lives in this state. During a really unprecedented times where we had a global pandemic coupled with an economic disaster here in the state and around the country, and of course civil unrest due to this long overdue racial reckoning happening in this country. The reality is no governor and certainly none of our constitutional officers have ever faced a series of crises quite like that in our state's history. And I think in most regards, Minnesotans recognize that, and they recognize the leadership that's been provided by Governor Walz and Secretary of State Steve Simon, Attorney General Ellison, and of course our auditor Julie Baha. All of them led and made the tough decisions they needed to do collectively together to make sure that our state was able to recover and to come out of the pandemic stronger than most other states. And so what I would say is this: the DFL is running on a message of community and opportunity. The idea with community that we don't leave anyone behind, including when times get tough, that we make sure that everyone is coming along in this state. And opportunity. Thanks to Governor Walz's decisions, we now have the lowest unemployment rate ever in our state's history and one of the lowest in our nation's nation's history. Not only is unemployment coupled with rising wages, we're seeing a really strong economy for businesses, for small businesses and our Fortune 500 businesses. The reality is these decisions that were made have helped Minnesota rebound faster than most other states. And again, this is what the record is that DFLers are presenting to voters, a strong state that's been able to recover thanks to tough decisions made by our leaders.
There's a preponderance of headlines right now. Voters are motivated by the recent overturning of Roe v. Wade. Voters are also potentially motivated by inflation and the rising cost of food and fuel. What other issues are bubbling to the surface?
Well, there's no doubt that people are frustrated by the Supreme Court decision in June and where this far-right Supreme Court majority wants to take this country. And people have every right to be angry and frustrated by that. And we've seen it manifest itself in elections in Alaska and Kansas and New York's 19th. And we're seeing that here on the ground in Minnesota as well. The reality is the other issues that people are talking about when we're on the doors is they're talking about education and their schools. They're talking about transportation and bonding, making sure that their communities are getting the funding they need from the state legislature. They're talking about the surplus. What are we going to do with the record surplus, which the Republicans walked away from the table on in the last legislative session and left, billions of dollars unspent when it could have been used either to give money back, as the governor proposed, and giving money back to taxpayers, and the Republicans walked away from that, or to actually invest in critical programs, which many DFLers wanted to do. There was a path forward. Republicans decided to walk away from that. And so we're hearing a lot of frustration amongst voters that we live in a state where there's nearly a $10 billion surplus, a lot of unmet needs, and the Republicans refusing to actually spend that money or return it to the taxpayers.
Are you finding your party's ability to reach out to voters easier than in previous years, or is it more challenging to get voters' attention due to the many social communication tools that are so readily available to us all?
This is a great question, and I really appreciate it, because people think, well, boy, it's so easy now to get a message out on social media. You have all these different platforms, and in some ways, I think because of all the different ways that people can get information these days, it makes it much more difficult actually to get a streamlined message into the hands of voters. And to be honest with you, we have to be much more creative in making sure that we are not only communicating on all those channels, but most importantly that we're meeting voters where they're at, right? And we're talking to them on the doors and on the phones and at events to make sure that we're having that personal conversation. It's sort of funny because I've been doing this work for 30 years, and it comes full circle to when I started with Paul Wellstone, when Paul used to say that the most effective form of political persuasion is face-to-face conversations with the voter about their hopes and their dreams for the future, and that hasn't changed after 30 years. That still is the most effective form of political persuasion. So as technology changes, of course, we still come back to what really works, which is just having a heart-to-heart conversation with your neighbor, your friend, your work colleague, etc. So.
Briefly before we have to close, as we're recording this interview, early voting, absentee voting are underway here in Minnesota. How has this lengthier period of voting changed how the DFL party handles its fundraising and spending?
Well, look, first off, we believe strongly in early voting. Our party believes that we need to remove barriers to voting, to make it easy and convenient for people to vote. And that's what this early vote does. It allows people to vote between, now and Election Day at a time of their choosing when it's convenient for them. And that's what we should be doing, and not putting barriers up to people. People are busy in their lives, and they should be able to exercise their right to vote, not just on Election Day. But let me say that it does change the way we campaign, of course, because that means we have to start a lot of our work much earlier in terms of persuading voters and getting messages out to them. And so in some ways, with the early vote means that you're actually elongating out the amount of time that we're actually campaigning with voters, meaning we have to raise more money, we have to send more mailers, we have to send more messages, all those pieces. So the benefit is that we see an increase in voting, and it makes it easier for people. The flip side of it is it's more money that parties have to spend to try to persuade voters.
DFL Party Chair Ken Martin, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you so much.
For more than than 20 years, Roy Wilkins was the executive secretary of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The Spiral for Justice Memorial on the Minnesota Capitol grounds commemorates his work for racial equality. I spoke with recently retired CAP Board Secretary Paul Mandel about the memorial and its recent renovation. Roy Wilkins is credited with helping to achieve some of the greatest civil rights advancements in U.S. history. What else is important to know about him?
Well, he was local. He was a local hero, basically, back in those days. Worked through the law system, which is why this whole, the spiral ends up pointing towards the judicial building. Unlike Martin Luther King, who worked outside the system, Wilkins worked through the system and was working through the legal processes. So that's the main distinction point. He did go on to national repute, and of course he's got the Wilkins Center here in St. Paul and such. Between the plaque and the doors that we are interactive, it tells more about his history and what impacts and some of the quotes that he had.
What did the quotes tell us?
The quotes are sort of give you an insight into both the times that he was working with and his thoughts, because everyone knows Martin Luther King and not everyone knows of Roy Wilkins. So if you start from this end, you get a bas relief of his face and some biographical, and then various quotes that sort of either depict the time or his work or his thoughts. Sort of his version of the I Have a Dream type thing.
What is the significance of the spiral shape and of the actual shape of the sort of pyramid type things?
I'm not quite sure if he was modeled somewhat after the Washington Monument, but it's purposely ascending as he started his work and became more and more prominent and became more and more involved. It starts off, from his years of leadership, basically markers in time that where he was struggling and not getting anywhere. And then as the pieces rise, he's getting more and more influence and getting more and more known and having more and more success, to the point when in the final end, it all points to the Judicial Center with the reliquary at the end point.
What about the flooring around the spirals? What is that supposed to represent?
It's all representative of African either symbols or patterns, sort of like the Hmong flooring is very, very representative of their designs. But it's repetitive, and it's purposely chained off because in the winter it gets very slippery with the ice, and bronze also heats up, so it gets a lot of sun and a lot of heating, which is why we have wood benches. They're actually wood coverings, because the bronze benches, when we first had them, some people got actually hurt by sitting on them in the middle of the summer.
Oh, ouch.
So we put some teak wood on top of them.
The memorial recently underwent a renovation. What had happened to it over time, and what needed to be done to restore it?
This is all bronze, and the first patination job had been done under extreme weather conditions, and it really didn't take well, and then it had been vandalized over time. The doors had all been broken, either accidentally or intentionally, so some of them were always open, some of them wouldn't open, or some of them were dangerous when they open and shut, so because they're on fulcrums. It needed complete stripping down and a repatination, so we chose the color based on the original intent, which was sort of a warm light bronze. And so they stripped it all down, repatinated it, and then waxed it all so it would stay like this.
So it won't change color over time?
So it won't change color over time. It won't become the green that we see copper happening.
Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Lurkey, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.